Hey everyone. So, I've been getting a lot of messages lately from people who want to share their stories, things that happened to them personally, things they've never talked about out loud. Tonight, I'm reading 5 of those stories, and I'll warn you now, a couple of these are going to stay with you. Let's get into it.
You are watching Mr.Batmire, where every shadow has a story.
This story was sent in by a woman I'll call Dana. At the time, she was 26, living alone in a ground floor apartment in a mid-sized city. She'd just moved in 2 months earlier. The building had 6 units. She barely knew her neighbors. The first time Dana noticed something wrong was a Tuesday night in November. She'd come home from a long shift, kicked off her shoes by the door, and started cooking dinner. Simple stuff, pasta, jarred sauce. She had her headphones in, some podcast going. Nothing unusual. Then she got a knock at the door. She opened it to find the man from the unit directly above hers, mid-50s. She'd seen him maybe twice in the hallway. He gave her this tight, polite smile. "I just wanted to check on you," he said. "I heard you drop something earlier. Sounded like it hurt." Dana told him she was fine. She hadn't dropped anything, but she smiled, said thanks, and closed the door. She thought about it for a second. How he'd heard her come in, heard her footsteps, maybe the clatter of a pan. Old building, thin floors. She let it go. 2 weeks later, it happened again. She was on the phone with her mom, walking back and forth the way you do during a long call. Another knock. Same man, same smile. Just checking in. "You seemed stressed today." Dana didn't know what to say to that. She told him she was fine and closed the door a little faster this time. She started paying attention after that. She noticed that whenever she got home, no matter what time, there were sounds from upstairs within a few minutes. Footsteps crossing toward the area directly above her front door, like he was listening for her key in the lock. She noticed that he seemed to know things. One morning she passed him in the lot and he said, unprompted, "Late night last night, huh? I hope you got some rest." She had been up until 2 a.m. watching a movie, quietly, alone. She started going through possibilities. Maybe he could hear her TV through the ceiling. Maybe he had a weird schedule that just happened to overlap with hers. Maybe he was just a lonely older guy who decided she was a friend. But then she found the hole. It was a Saturday, late afternoon. She was rearranging her closet, the one in her bedroom, the one she barely used, and she pulled the shelf unit away from the back wall to get behind it. There was a hole in the drywall, small, maybe 1.5 inches across, old-looking, edges worn smooth. Someone had drilled it at an angle, not straight through, but angled up, toward the unit above. Dana stood there for a very long moment. Then she took out her phone, turned on the flashlight, and looked through it. She couldn't see anything. It was dark on the other end, but air was moving through it, cool air, and there was a faint smell, something like cedar. She covered it with a piece of packing tape that night and called her landlord in the morning. He came and looked at it, said it was probably from some old repair job, and patched it. Dana moved out 6 weeks later. She never confronted the neighbor. She never found out if he'd drilled that hole or if he'd known it was there before she moved in. But she thinks about the fact that her bedroom closet, the one she stored her most private things in, had been open to that man's apartment for however long she'd been there. And she thinks about how he always seemed to know whether she'd slept. She hasn't lived on a ground floor since. This one was submitted by a guy I'll call Marcus. He was 19, home from his first semester of college, staying at his parents' house for winter break. They lived in a quiet suburb, the kind of neighborhood where people leave their garage doors open and know their neighbors by first name. It was a Thursday night in December. His parents had gone to a holiday party a few streets over and weren't expected back until midnight. Marcus was home alone, playing video games in the basement. Around 9:30, he heard the front door open. His first thought was that his parents had come back early. He paused his game, heard footsteps in the entryway, heard the closet door, the one near the front entrance, slide open. He called up the stairs, "Hey, you guys back already?" No answer. The footsteps stopped. Marcus waited. Maybe they hadn't heard him. He called again. Still nothing. The house was completely quiet. He picked up his phone and texted his mum, "You home?" Her reply came back in under a minute. "No, still at the Harrisons, why?" Marcus put the phone down very slowly. He was in the basement. The only way out was the staircase, which led directly into the kitchen, which was connected to the entryway, which was where he'd heard someone walking around. He sat completely still and listened. After about 30 seconds, the footsteps started again, slow, moving through the kitchen now. He could hear the creak of a specific floorboard, one near the island, one he'd stepped on 1,000 times. Whoever was up there was heading toward the basement door. Marcus grabbed the only thing nearby, a guitar that had been down there since high school, and pressed himself against the wall next to the staircase, below the sightline of anyone looking down. The basement door opened, a long pause, then a voice, a man's voice, quiet and confused. "Hello. Is someone here?" Marcus didn't move, didn't breathe. After what felt like forever, the door closed. He heard the footsteps retreat, heard the front door open and close again. He stayed in the basement for 20 minutes before he went upstairs. The entryway closet was open. One of his dad's coats had been pulled off the hanger and left on the floor. When his parents got home, they called the police. An officer came and took a report. No signs of forced entry, which, Marcus's dad realized immediately, was because he had left the front door unlocked. The officer had a theory the neighborhood layouts in that subdivision were nearly identical. A lot of people used the same builder. Same closet next to the front door, same basement staircase. It was probably someone who'd had too much to drink at a party nearby, walked to what he thought was his house, opened the unlocked door, went for the closet, out of pure muscle memory, and only realized something was wrong when he heard Marcus's voice. Probably, Marcus says the part that bothers him most isn't the break-in, it's that the man stood at the top of the basement stairs in the dark, the door open, Marcus below him, and said nothing for nearly 10 seconds before he spoke. Just stood there, listening. This story comes from a woman I'll call Raina. At the time she was 22, camping solo in a national forest. Something she'd done a dozen times before without incident. She was experienced. She had good gear. She knew what she was doing. Raina had picked a dispersed campsite about 3 miles off the main trail. No hookups, no amenities, just a flat clearing near a creek. She'd been there twice before. It was beautiful and quiet and, she thought, unlikely to have other visitors on a weekday in early October. She was right. When she arrived around 4 in the afternoon, there was nobody else around. She set up her tent, made dinner, read until it got dark. Normal, comfortable. She was in her sleeping bag by 9, asleep by 9:30. She woke up at 2 a.m. No sound, no wind. The creek was audible in the distance. She wasn't sure what had woken her. She lay still for a moment listening. Then she heard it. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, circling her tent. Her first thought was an animal, a deer, maybe a black bear. But the gait was wrong. Too even, too methodical. 1 step, pause, 1 step, pause. She reached for her flashlight and bear spray and sat up as slowly as she could. The footsteps stopped. Silence. She waited 2 full minutes. Nothing. She'd almost convinced herself she'd imagined it when the footsteps started again, this time right outside the tent door. Right there, maybe a foot away from the mesh. She turned on her flashlight and pointed it at the door. Through the mesh, she could see the ground. Leaves, pine needles, 2 boots, toes pointed toward her. Human boots. Raina did not scream. She says that's the thing she's weirdly proud of. She didn't scream. She said, in the flattest, most controlled voice she could manage, "I know you're there. I have bear spray and I'm not afraid to use it through the tent wall. Walk away right now." The boots didn't move. 10 seconds, 15. Then, slowly, they turned. She watched them step away, one careful footfall at a time, until they disappeared into the dark. She didn't sleep. She sat upright with the flashlight and spray in her hands until dawn, listening. She heard nothing else. When it was light, she packed up in under 10 minutes and hiked out. In the clearing, about 40 feet from her tent, she found a second campsite that hadn't been there the day before. A sleeping bag, a small backpack, a cooking pot. No tent, no person. Someone had set up camp that night without her seeing them arrive. Someone who, at 2 a.m., had decided to walk to her tent instead of staying at their own. She reported it to a ranger station on the way out. They said they'd look into it. She never heard anything back. She still camps alone sometimes, but not at dispersed sites anymore, and not on weeknights in October when the trails are quiet and no one knows where you are. This one was sent by a couple I'll call Joel and Becca. They'd moved into their house, a 3-bedroom in a residential neighborhood, about 4 months before any of this started. Nothing unusual about the house, nothing unusual about the street. They installed a security camera system, mostly because they had a package theft problem in the neighborhood. 3 cameras, front door, backyard, and 1 covering the driveway, all motion activated, all recording to a local drive. For the first 2 months, the cameras caught exactly what you'd expect: mail carriers, raccoons, a neighbor's dog that kept escaping. Then one Tuesday, Becca got a motion alert at 3:17 a.m. She checked the app and saw it was the backyard camera. She almost ignored it, probably another raccoon, but she tapped through anyway. The camera showed their backyard wooden fence, patio furniture, the shed in the corner, and standing against the back fence, almost invisible in the shadows, was a person. She woke Joel up. They watched the footage together. The figure stood completely still for 4 minutes and 11 seconds. Then they climbed back over the fence and disappeared. They called the police. An officer came, looked at the footage and took a report. Recommended they add a light to the backyard. Said it was probably a transient cutting through the neighborhood, not uncommon. They added the light. They checked the footage every morning. For 2 weeks, nothing. Then the person came back. Same fence line, same corner, same stillness. But this time they stayed for longer, over 8 minutes. And this time, at the very end, they did something new. They walked to the center of the yard, right up to the back of the house. They stood in front of the kitchen window for a moment. Then they tried the door. It was locked. They paused, then turned and walked back the way they'd come. Joel and Becca were sleeping 20 feet away when that happened. They called the police again. A different officer this time. He watched the footage and his demeanor changed. He called for a second unit. They searched the neighborhood but didn't find anyone. This officer took the report much more seriously. He pointed out something Joel and Becca hadn't noticed in the first visit. The figure had stood against the fence in the exact spot that wasn't covered by the motion light. They'd stood in the one blind spot, either by luck or because they already knew where the camera was. Joel and Becca stayed with family for a week. When they went back home, they added 2 more cameras, a deadbolt on the back door, and motion sensor floodlights on all 4 corners of the yard. The person never came back. They never found out who it was. But what Joel told me, what he said still bothers him, is that both visits happened on Tuesday nights, and they'd had security cameras installed on a Tuesday. The installation van would have been parked outside for about 2 hours. Anyone watching from the street could have seen it. Whoever this was, they may have known the cameras were going in before they ever entered the yard. The last story tonight comes from a woman I'll call Simone. She was 24, driving home alone from a friend's bachelorette weekend about 4 hours away. She'd meant to leave early in the morning but ended up leaving around 10 at night. She'd done the drive before. It was mostly highway. About halfway home, around midnight, Simone pulled into a rest stop. She was tired, needed to use the bathroom, and wanted to get some coffee from the vending machine. The parking lot was nearly empty. A couple of semi-trucks at the far end, 1 minivan near the building. Her car was the only one at the row of spots near the entrance. She went inside, used the bathroom, grabbed her coffee, and came back out. The whole thing took maybe 4 minutes. When she got back to her car, there was a man standing near it, not at it, near it, maybe 8 feet away, between her car and the one next to hers, which hadn't been there when she parked. He was looking at his phone. She hesitated. She'd parked under a light. Other people were around. a trucker walking toward the building, a family piling out of the minivan. She told herself she was being paranoid and walked to her car. As she unlocked it, the man said, "Excuse me, hey, do you know if there's a gas station close by?" She said she wasn't sure, she was just passing through. She got in the car. She pulled out of the spot and started toward the exit. In her rearview mirror, she could see the man. He was watching her leave. His phone was in his pocket now. It had been in his pocket the whole time she was watching him get into the car. She got on the highway. About 10 minutes later, headlights appeared behind her. She didn't think anything of it at first, but after another 15 minutes, the same lights were still there. Same distance, same lane. She changed lanes. The car behind her changed lanes. She slowed down slightly. The car slowed down. Simone's heart was hammering. She called her friend, the one whose bachelorette she'd just left, and kept her on the phone. She didn't merge back to her exit. She drove past it. The car behind her kept following. She drove to a police station she'd seen signs for a few miles back, pulled into the lit parking lot. The car behind her, a dark sedan, slowed as it passed, then kept going. She sat in that parking lot for 40 minutes. A cop knocked on her window after 20 and she told him what happened. He said he'd drive her exit when she was ready to go. He did. The sedan wasn't on the road. She made it home safe. But here's what Simone keeps thinking about. The man's question, "Do you know if there's a gas station close by?" made no sense. His car was parked at a rest stop. There was a map right inside the building. He had a smartphone. She thinks the question was never the point. She thinks he asked it to buy time, to see where she was looking, to confirm she was alone. She thinks about the 4 minutes she was inside and whether he'd been watching her go in, whether he'd followed her off the highway or had just been waiting for someone like her, a woman, alone, stopping at midnight, to walk out the door. She's never stopped at that rest stop again. She barely stops at any rest stop alone at night anymore. And she's never really figured out what she would have done if she hadn't noticed his phone go from out to pocket. If she hadn't thought to watch him in the mirror. All right, that's all 5 stories for tonight. Thank you to everyone who sent these in. I know it's not easy to share something like this, and I'm grateful you trusted me with it. If you want your own story featured, there's a link in the description where you can submit it. No names are ever used without permission. And if any of this hit a little close to home, I hope you're somewhere safe right now. I'll see you in the next one.